beautiful, and welcome back to another episode of Once Upon a Dribble. We may sound the same, but we have a new look about us. We're glowing, Calvin. How are you feeling?
We've been told that we have great faces for radio. So we apologize to everyone who has to put up with this. But if you are watching on YouTube, we do appreciate you being here. Do us a favor, if you like what you see here, like the video, leave a comment, leave a subscription, just like every other YouTube channel asks you to do. That stuff really helps, and we're excited to be here. So whether you're listening on the podcast or watching on YouTube, it's another beautiful day to get the NBA time machine out of the garage.
That's right, and we are trying something a little bit different today. So yeah, we hope you enjoy it. We'll of course have everything available as usual on Spotify or wherever you stream your podcasts, and of course we're trying this out right now. So today, to break this in, we are doing this could be a continuing series. If you guys like what we're doing here, then we're happy to bring this back. This can definitely be done a lot. But we are taking uh, NBA champions or just really good NBA teams from seasons past and throwing them in the NBA time machine with us. We're going back in time. We're piling everyone into the van, and we are bringing them back to 2023 and seeing how these classic teams would fare in today's game. So if you've ever wondered how the 86 Celtics would look today, if you ever wondered how the 70s Blazers with Bill Walton would look today, or really anyone in between, that's what we're kind of going for. So Calvin and I selected three popular champions or near champions from seasons past, and we're gonna discuss if we think they'd if they could contend in 2023. So as of right now, as of this May 23rd, we are on the verge of the 2023 NBA Finals. So it might be fun to see how these teams would fare against the Nuggets, and we presume the Miami Heat as well. So
Knock on wood.
knock
Hopefully,
on wood.
we haven't had the first ever NBA 3-0 comeback. I'm willing to put some money down on that.
All right.
And this is basically all Bill and Ted's excellent adventure. We are taking teams from different eras and bringing them all back into the modern day. So this is Josh and Calvin's excellent adventure. We always talk about, these other teams, how things were different in the NBA. As JJ Redick said, Bob Cousy was playing against firemen and plumbers. Not necessarily true, but the point stands. A lot of people have pointed out that Bill Russell won a lot of his championships in an NBA that had 8 teams, 12 teams, and
Yeah.
low competition. So as we're going through the NBA time machine, we thought a lot about what teams we wanted to bring in to the 2023 NBA season. And ultimately we decided we wanted to stay relatively modern. And we do say relatively, particularly for you Gen Z and millennial types. Maybe it's a little bit behind your times, behind our time. We're both millennials. But we're going to begin in the 80s, Josh. And of all the iconic 80 teams, where are we going to go with this NBA time machine?
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from. I know some people are going to have certain teams pop out to them from the 1980s, not to mention, of course, those Los Angeles Lakers and Boston Celtics that pretty much ran the decade. But we're going to jump towards the end of the decade when there's a team that kind of caught that window in between the Showtime Lakers and Jordan's Bulls, and that is the Bad Boys Pistons, who ran the last few years of the 1980s. They got a little bit there the first year of the 90s, but that's the team we're specifically going to be looking at, and I want to look at this thought exercise through the lens of the 1989 and 1990 teams. Those are the teams that went back to back and really dominated that era when Jordan's still growing up. He's still waiting for the supporting cast to catch up to him because Pippen isn't quite Pippen yet, and the Lakers aren't the Lakers anymore. I mean, they're still very good. They're still going to make a couple of finals in this window because they have Magic, but Kareem is essentially done at this point. And this is where we have this extremely hard-nosed, quite frankly, for a lot of people, unlikable Pistons teams because of their style of play, where you're looking at guys like Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, a young Dennis Rodman, Joe Dumars, and the Mark Aguirre, Rick Mahorn. I mean, this is a team that's pretty loaded, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, Detroit is a city that was built on American muscle. This is a hard-nosed, go-to-big city. And these Pistons teams fit right into that
that's the
definition.
mold.
Don't take any crap from anybody. Go and do what you need to do. And if you need to throw a few fists along the way, so be it. But yeah, it was building. It was building for this team. They make the finals in '88 and they lose. But then the '88 '89 season is when things really start turning around. And it really kind of started with trade that really kind of changed the direction of this franchise, Josh.
Yeah, so basically, the biggest thing that happened here was fan favorite Adrian Dantley was one of their big scorers, and there were some rumblings in the locker room that he was unhappy that things weren't quite vibing the way they should. Because like you said, they hadn't broken through yet. They lost to the Lakers the year prior. They lost to the Celtics the year before that, and they make this big splash at the trade deadline where they moved Dantley, again a fan favorite, and this was a trade that was pretty maligned by Pistons fans at the time, for Mark Aguirre, who's another score first player from Dallas. But what ends up happening is this just completely reshuffles the chemistry with the team. Aguirre falls seamlessly into this lesser role, but it greatly benefits the Pistons as a whole. And when we were doing this exercise, I asked myself, if we're taking these teams from years past, what makes a successful NBA team in 2023? And you can add to this if you want, but I thought of three main things that will contribute to a success today, and that's star power, whether it's one top five guy or a couple top 10 to 15 guys, you got to have some degree of star power. That goes without saying. NBA is a star driven league, always has been, probably always will be. It's the one sport where an individual can impose his will on the game more so than in football. Even if you have a great quarterback, if your defense sucks, you're gonna look like Drew Brees of the 2000s, where you're going 7-9 or 8-8
Oof,
every season.
oof,
Um,
it's painful.
or you can be Mike Trout, where you're debatably the greatest baseball player of all time, but Mike Trout hasn't sniffed a playoff game since, was it 2014, something like that. But Mike Trout, player of the generation, he's barely been in the playoffs. But in basketball, it's a different story. Of course, you need a team to get all the way to really go over the top, but there's a certain floor that a superstar can give you, and that's what I'm kind of looking at. So that's my first thing. And then the second thing is spacing and shooting. We're in the spacing era. This isn't the dead ball era anymore. This isn't the classic era anymore. You kind of got to have some shooting on your roster, or things are going to get very clogged. And then the last thing I look at is versatility on both sides of the floor. So I'm talking positionless basketball. You have guys that can play two positions, three positions. You have guys that can guard multiple positions as well on the other side of the floor. So those are the three main things that I identified um, for successful teams today: just star power, shooting, and some degree of versatility. I don't know if you considered anything else that stood out to you, or
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. The NBA game has changed dramatically, even within just the last decade.
yeah.
Even within just the last 5 years, arguably, the NBA looks a lot different than it did just 5 years ago. So when we're going back, here 30, what is it, 32, 33 years,
Hmm.
we're talking about an entirely different shape to how these rosters are put together, to how teams actually succeed. Everything you just mentioned in the day's NBA, absolutely essential. Has it always been that way? Well, I'm not quite sure it's been the case. And, beginning here with the Bad Boy Pistons, we're talking about a team that throughout the course of the season, um, per game, averaged 5 3-point attempts per game. Right now in the NBA, most teams have a single player who gets 5 3-point attempts in a half in a quarter. But as far as the other aspects of what you look for, they were there.
They
We're
were.
talking about Zeke in his prime, Isaiah Thomas, and we're talking about a roster with several components, interesting pieces that are going to give you that defense and, of course, live up to that definition of the Bad Boy Pistons. Everything from Dennis Rodman to Joe Dumars. We mentioned how Dantley was traded for Aguirre, and even good old Bill Laimbeer. All the pieces were in there for the Pistons to be just a dynamic team. But the way they had to get to the top was quite a bit different. And it's going to be interesting to see how they compete with 2023 teams.
I gotta say, Bill Laimbeer, just an absolute fan favorite, right? I mean, he's basically the Draymond Green of the day. Right? I can't imagine if Bill
That's
Laimbeer had a
actually a good
podcast
comparison.
back in the
That's an
80s.
excellent comparison.
Speaking of, a little bit of a sidetrack. I find it astonishing that we're in an age where a player of Draymond Green status in the middle of a playoff series, heck, right even after a pivotal playoff game, can hop onto his platform, his podcast, and just spill some stuff where I'm like, man, I can't believe he just said that. I'm not leaning one way or another on this. I mean, during that Lakers Warriors series, he would hop on and I'm like, man, I'm
Instantly getting
surprised
on.
they're saying this.
And that's it's only gonna get heavier than that. In the XFL, which is a joke football league, call it what you want, but in the XFL, right after players get a touchdown, they get a microphone in their face for a quick little interview.
Oh
It's
man,
only going to increase. It's only going to get bigger and badder. Thank goodness this Pistons team did not have access to that. Otherwise, all of those episodes would have been explicit and just chock full of profanity. But that's neither here nor there.
that's neither here nor there. I mean, yeah, you had Lambeer, I mean, even though this wasn't Rodman at his most eccentric, you still had Rodman, and he was more than an irritant for a lot of teams, even back in the late '80s when he was still blossoming. But going back to the thought exercise, I thought about this as well. I think I landed somewhere in the same arena as you, where the Pistons check a lot of boxes on what makes a successful NBA team. They don't quite
Yeah,
check all of them, but I think it goes without doubt that they would be successful for a few different reasons. And the big one you nailed is that they might not have that upper echelon star power, but they have a lot of high level stars. And we're talking, like you said, Isaiah Thomas. He's at peak of powers or relatively close to peak of powers. He's aged 27 and 28 during these back-to-back title runs. Then you have Dumars, who's only 25. I'm just looking at their ages right now. Rodman's 27. Um, and they're like first team all defensive guys. And and then leading to this, one of the other factors I was looking at is just the versatility. You had 9 guys on the 1990 team that were between 6'5" and 6'10", and to me that just screams. I mean,
that's
especially when they're
pretty
all
much.
relatively young and athletic, that's switchability, that's portability, that's ability to play and guard multiple positions. And even if you don't have the shooting necessarily, which I think would hurt their offensive prowess. I mean, Isaiah Thomas was astonishingly never a shooter, and he never even really attempted
Oh, he
to
never needed to be.
add a 3-point shot to
Never
his
needed
arsenal.
to be a shooter. Yeah.
I think they're funny enough. What I guess a point in their favor is Lambeer towards the end of his career. He became a real stretch five. I think I was looking at it. I'm just looking at Basketball Reference as we're talking right now. In 1990, uh, he took two threes a game, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot because he's a center. He's 6'11", I think. Yeah, 6'11", taking two threes in 1990, and he made 36% of them. Um, about a three a game. And I remember when we were doing the Jordan Bulls versus Bad Boys Pistons episode a little bit back, and I was watching some fourth quarters of those series, and Lambier's spotting up from like 20 feet away. So I mean, but again, if he's your best shooter, or if Dumars, who's your best shooter, is taking like less than half an attempt per game, I don't know if there's enough shooting there. But the conclusion I ultimately landed at, and then you can let me know any other thoughts you have on the Pistons, is I think that they're a playoff contender in 2023. They're maybe missing a piece or two to be one of those true title contenders. But this is a team I could see them winning 50 to 55 games, maybe getting home court in the first round, winning a series, maybe winning a second series and sneaking into the conference finals. But ultimately, I guess the blueprint today is like those Miami Heat teams of today that are just gonna grind you out, grind you into dust, and eke out those, I guess by today's standards, low scoring 95, 90 wins or whatever. But um, ultimately, that's where I landed on the Bad Boys Pistons.
I feel about the same that you're going to be. That kind of in that 50, low 50 win total.
Right.
And you have to assume that if they are playing in 2023, that they maybe change the way they play a little bit. Maybe they put up a few more 3-point shots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows how that affects things? But assuming that they kind of still do stay relatively close to who they are, mostly close to who they are, just on sheer grit, they're gonna win a lot of games. They may
Yeah.
have to change a few things because they're gonna do things that are no longer allowed that are gonna be called foul. Back then, it was all bets were off. So that's going to impact them as well. I put them right around that 50 win total, which, most seasons puts you as about that 4 or 5 seed,
That sounds about
and
right.
puts you in a position to maybe do some damage in the playoffs, maybe go home round one. It could
There you
really
go.
go away. And all-time great Pistons team, by the way, they only lost twice in the playoffs. They nearly swept the playoffs, including a
Which year is
sweep
this?
of the eight. This is the 88-89 season.
88, 89. Wow.
They sweep the Celtics, sweep the Bucks, go 6 games against the developing Mike and the developing Pippen, and then sweep the behemoth Los Angeles Lakers, who are
Wow.
on the last leg at
How
that.
did I not even realize that? 'Cause I was looking at their game results, and I see that after starting 26 and 13, they finished the regular season going, what would that be, 37 and 6 to end the regular season. And then when you couple that with a 15 and 2 postseason run, that's a insane stretch of basketball for
Oh, no
like four
doubt.
or 5 months. That's crazy. Wow. Um, wow, that's impressive.
And it takes us from one era of basketball in those late 1980s. A little something else was going on behind the scenes as the Pistons were making these runs. A new expansion team was started in the city of Orlando, Florida, Josh. And that's where I want to take the NBA time machine on our next stop. But we're going to go a few years. The Orlando Magic are going to make the finals in their 6th year of existence. Josh, the Denver Nuggets just made the finals for the first time at the time of the recording this episode. They were founded in 1967.
Brutal. Wow,
So,
60 year. That's crazy.
yeah, they're almost as old as my dad, and my dad's not a young guy anymore. Uh, but how does the franchise then make the fortunes change and make the finals in their 6 year of existence? But it all happens on by the fall of just a few ping pong balls. We're talking about the 90s Magic. Shaquille O'Neal's coming out of LSU, and he's the biggest prospect of the decade. Similar to when David Robinson came out, later Tim Duncan, later LeBron James, Zion Williamson, Wembanyama. Sometimes there's just everybody knows who the number one pick is going to be, and everybody wants to win that lottery. The Magic win the lottery. Shaq comes in as a rookie, and Minnesota, who by the way only won 15 games, gets Christian Laettner
Oh no.
for
Uh,
Minnesota. Shaq comes in, he elevates a 21 win team to a 31 win team. They missed the playoffs by 1 game. Actually, they missed the playoffs by a tiebreaker. They're tied with the Pacers for the 8th seed. Indiana got the tiebreaker. So they have a 1.5% chance of winning the lottery again. And for the Magic happens. They get the lottery. Sorry again, Minnesota. You get Isaiah Ryder.
oh no.
Last penny lottery.
Wow. So literally in the space of essentially two draft lotteries, the Magic have a
Completely
championship
changed.
core.
The closest thing we've seen to it in the modern NBA game is probably the Oklahoma City Thunder getting
Yeah,
Westbrook, Durant, and Harden are in essentially back-to-back drafts.
that's a good
Uh,
comparison. Yeah.
and they weren't able to do much with it because they didn't let it grow to its to full bloom. But that is about as lucky as a team can get, and the Magic were just that lucky as well. Um, Adding Penny Hardaway makes equals a 50 win campaign in 93, 94. And then after that, it's 57 wins and 61 wins in the regular seasons over
Wow.
the next 2 years, including a finals appearance. Those are the teams we're bringing into 2023. And Josh, before we kind of break this down, do you have any thoughts or any things that kind of jumps out when you think about these early 90s Magic teams?
Yeah, for me it just I think like you said it just whenever I think of those teams I just think of Shaquille O'Neal and how generational of a prospect he was and we know what he becomes, and I think he's obviously it's fairly deserved that he is remembered as a Los Angeles Laker. You know, peak of his
Sure.
career is in LA. LA's a bigger market. He
I
played
agree.
with Kobe, won 3 championships. That's understandable, but when you look at how different he looked and how NBA ready he was right off the bat, I mean, like you said, they saw what was it, a 20 win jump essentially from when he was drafted, uh, which is, I mean, just incredible. I mean, it's an exponential growth from the time that he was drafted to the time when he ultimately ended up in Los Angeles. So, I mean, I know when I think of those teams, I think of, like you said, maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity. You wonder what would have happened if they stuck together for a little bit longer. I know a lot of that has to do with Penny Hardaway ultimately not being healthy and having his bevy of injuries, which is a real bummer because Penny Hardaway is one of the great
Absolutely.
lost. I mean, he had the potential to be honestly an all timer, all NBA guy, tall guard, athletic, versatile, fantastic playmaker, great court vision. I mean, we can go on and on about him, but I mean, those Magic teams are special. I know they're iconic for Magic fans. I know they're held. And not only that, but for me, they're kind of synonymous with the '90s. I think of those uniforms.
Yeah.
I think of them being an expansion team and just being new in that decade. And when you have a signature player like that right off the bat, it's hard. I mean, in a decade with Michael Jordan, I think it's pretty impressive that when you think of the '90s Magic, I mean, that's kind of synonymous with the decade. So that's where I ultimately land with them.
No, and that's a great landing spot, and that really does sum up just how uh, paramount this team was to this decade of NBA basketball. But now they're playing 2023 teams, now hypothetical NBA time machine here. Similar to what we saw with the Pistons, and I think this is going to be the case of any NBA era versus the modern era. The question is, how do they adjust to the game in wildly more three-point shooting? Well, the simple answer is this team, these Orlando Magic, are going to adjust just fine.
Oh yeah.
In 95-96, although only attempting 17 threes a game, they shoot 37% as a team. That would be good enough for ninth in 2023. The next year, they upped that to 37.8 on 20 attempts, which would have been the fifth best percentage in 2023. Assuming that percentage can stay relatively in the same ballpark as the volume goes up, we had guys on this team besides the big two. We had Nick Anderson over those 2 seasons shooting 40.3% on just under 6 attempts a game. And then we had the Dennis Scott, nicknamed 3D, great nickname,
Wow, that's fantastic. I didn't know that one. Wow, that's an
fantastic
all-timer.
name. And he shoots 32.6 on just about 7 attempts
Wow.
over these 2 years. So, while Penny himself only shoots 33.1, that's respectable. It's not gonna do anything to hurt you. It can be assumed that with modern coaching and training, that he can probably get that percentage up himself.
Yeah.
This is one team where adjusting to the modern NBA style of play, it's not going to be an issue for them.
No. That's where I think I landed as well. It's hard not to get there, honestly. Just looking at these numbers from what you're telling me, and I'm hopping onto their page. I mean, they took threes at a pretty healthy clip for the era. I'm looking at their ages. I mean, this is a pretty spry team. The 1995 team that made the finals, only three guys on their roster had more than 5 years of experience. Like this is a young
They
team.
and again, 6 years of existence. These expansion teams are not supposed to be good for a good decade
Right.
because they're so young, because everyone they have is under the age of
Wow.
30. And they break the trend. And a lot of that has to do with the big Deezer himself, who, like you said, was NBA ready from day one.
Yeah.
By this time, the year they make the finals, and the best year of Magic history, in my opinion, he's only 22 years old, Josh, and he is averaging 29.3 points a game, leading the NBA in scoring. Has a big man. It's one of 2 times in his career that he'll lead the NBA in points per game. The other one being his MVP season in Los Angeles.
Right.
Combining that with the 12 rebounds, this 7'1", 315-pound mega human is completely unguardable. Already has a 22-year-old.
Unbelievable.
In fact, in just his third game of the season that year, in a road game against the man who would actually be drafted right after him, Alonzo Mourning, very good player, Shaq delivered 36 and 20 on 20 of 32 shooting,
Jeez.
playing 37 minutes, no overtime. Sat on the bench for 1 minute in that
Oh
game.
man, Shaq, why'd you do it to him like that? That's insane.
That line that just does not happen in today's game. And if Shaq can even get close to that kind of stat line, and the Magic are going to have a good to better chance against any NBA team in the modern game.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, the team wasn't even necessarily bad defensively either. It looks like they were, according
Oh,
to
not at
the
all.
numbers, they were average at worst, maybe slightly better than average at best, which when you combine that with a number one offense, which I think would compete for a number one offense in today's game. And the way I approach the thought exercise as well is I said, you know what, we take whatever team we're transporting into today's era. Let's say we're going to drop them in June or July. We say, hey, we're going to give you guys 3 or 4 months of training camp, of preseason. We're going to give you all the resources you need to know what today's game is like. We're going to tell you what to expect. And if you tell Nick Anderson and Dennis Scott and Anthony Hardaway and Shaq that this is going to be a fast game, that you're going to be able to utilize your youth, your athleticism, your shooting, I don't see how this team just doesn't run rampant through the league. Nick Anderson, 27 in 1995. Dennis Scott, 26. Penny's 23.
And they
Um,
did manage to get veteran leadership in the free
Horace Grant.
agent.
Well, they have. I was going to say they have Horace Grant, who's a three-time champion, former All-Star
Three-time
himself.
champion. He comes in. He's basically
Perfect.
the leader in the locker room.
Awesome.
I think in today's game, he has to come off the bench.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's probably the only difference is you can't start two non-shooters. But he'll come off the bench in 2023, and that team has every piece they need to compete in today's NBA.
And then you have 39-year-old Tree Rollins playing the Udonis Haslam role. We'll maybe see a 20 minutes total all year, 20 minutes. But no, Tree Rollins was a nice vet. So no, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think you're painting a beautiful picture with these Magic. And is this what's your ultimate consensus with them?
My ultimate consensus is this team could and would be able to adapt to the modern NBA without necessarily losing any of that special sauce that made them so great in their own time. I'm talking about a 56 to 59 win team here, Josh. Likely conference finals or better.
I don't think it's a hot take. You know what I would love? I would love to see, just after watching them last night, I'd love to see this Magic team against Jokic's Nuggets. I think it would be
It would be a fun
maybe
game.
a lot of youth, a lot of athleticism, a lot of like high pace, and two big men with
Ooh,
really contrasting
is
styles.
that?
But that'd be awesome.
Oh, fantastic.
That'd be awesome.
Uh, I think both players, respectively, Jokic and Shaq, could probably go off for 30
Oh yeah,
against one another because
so
they're so different and yet both so good at what they both respectively do. They could not stop each other.
oh no, you're right. Completely agree.
And it's funny that we did mention a second ago that my only thing is that Hurst Grant needs to come off the bench because, in my opinion, you cannot start two non-shooters in the
Yeah.
2023 NBA game. Remember that because that takes us to our next stop in the NBA time machine. We'll be going on this last stop for today's episode, Josh.
We we're gonna head out west. We're gonna take a stop in the Lone Star State to take a look at the San Antonio Spurs. Specifically looking at the 1999 team that employed the Twin Towers, Tim Duncan and David Robinson. And the Spurs history is pretty interesting because
Oh,
as we know from recent news, they
brother.
I know Calvin's a little salty that the Spurs somehow just landed another generational big man. uh,
Unbelievable.
I can't believe it.
Once is fine. Twice, it's like, okay. Three times, get out of here.
And it's like basically it's like lined up perfectly where you maybe have a year or two of maybe a couple down years, but it's incredible how it's lined up. I was like, oh, Detroit might be kind of cool. It's a historic franchise. Houston could really use it. Charlotte's been rudderless pretty much their entire existence, and then here comes five-time champion, never missed the playoffs until recently, San Antonio Spurs, and Wemby. Wemby's going to be eating some good barbecue this coming year. I'll say that much.
The question is, how do you microchip ping pong balls, and who does Popovich know? that has access to this technology.
Who's he paying off at this point?
Well,
Insane.
regardless of where they were, what's going on in the present day San Antonio, in 1999, the second generation of draft pick, Tim Duncan, is entering just his second season in the league.
Mhm.
He's relatively old. He made a promise that he would graduate from college, so similar to David Robinson even. He entered the NBA at a relatively old age for a rookie, but he comes in and he's instantly one of the best front court players in the league.
Mhm.
And without doubt, that Duncan Robinson duo, the Twin Towers, is the number one front court in the NBA. But things don't start off too well right out of the gate here, Josh. I mean, this is the first season without Michael leading Chicago the second time. And the season is interrupted by an extensive lockout. Arguably the worst lockout in NBA history. It got
Ugly.
down to the last day before the season would have been canceled for the players and owners to come to an understanding. Consequently, we had a 50-game regular season. San Antonio actually begins the regular season 6-8. Uh, just stumbling on their own 2 feet out of the gate, culminating in a very ugly 101-87 loss to Utah, who was the finals favorite going into the season.
Right.
After that point, though, after that game, Josh, San Antonio is going to go 31-5.
What's that
For
looking like over a
perspective,
full season?
yeah, for perspective, if we could do 31-5 pace over an 82-game season, we're talking about a 71-win team.
Jeez.
In other words, the greatest regular season team of all time.
Unbelievable.
So San Antonio was the perfect team at the perfect time for late 90s basketball. But how would that team, which was perfect for the era, but would be utterly unconventional in today's game, do in 2023? There's a lot of concerns, but Josh, why don't you get us started on what you see?
Yeah, I think you started to nail it on the head there. That was a team that really took advantage of the era, not only the era, but just the transition period in which the NBA found itself. I hate putting asterisks or conditions on NBA champions. I think it's hard to win a championship, no matter who you are, no matter what the conditions are. But I think you can also be fair and objective and state facts when you say that, yeah, this was a transition period. Michael just retired. The league's in a flux. We're looking for the next great team to come out. And not only that, but yeah, this was an ugly lockout season. 50 games crammed into such a short span. There are multiple accounts of players not even being in shape because they weren't sure that there was going to be a season at all. Just a really weird year. Of course, this is the season in which the Knicks, an 8 seed, only other time in NBA history in which this has happened, stormed to the NBA Finals. You could argue that the Knicks weren't a true 8 seed because of the 50 games. Their final record only ended up being 6 games worse than the one-seeded Miami Heat. But
I
eight
didn't
seed
realize that.
nonetheless. Yeah,
Wow.
I didn't even realize. I'm always like, oh yeah, the underdog Knicks made the finals, but they were only 6 games under the one seed because of that 50 game. Everything was kind of crunched and a little more congested than things normally would be. But back to the Spurs. I was thinking about my criteria, and I was like, dominant defensive team, clearly perfect for the pace of the era.
There's
But
no
when I
doubt.
look at the star power, David Robinson's aging. I mean, they got Tim Duncan because David Robinson got hurt in 1997, and he's not the same guy at this point anymore. Still
No.
a star level player, but he's not the admiral, chiseled out of granite, who in 1994-95 is winning MVPs and taking the Spurs to the conference finals by himself. He's not the same guy, and while Tim Duncan is, like you said, another guy who's NBA ready out of the gate and basically a 2010 guy from the get go, he's not who he's going to be in 2003 and in 2004 and 2005. So when you combine that with the fact that when you look at the rest of their roster, I think that they were so good in this shortened season because they had a lot of veterans. They didn't have to go over this full 82 game jaunt, this full marathon to get to the finals. You have Avery Johnson, 33, awesome locker room guy. Um, decent table setter as a point guard, but old. Sean Elliott, 30. Mario Ellie, 35. Jaren Jackson Sr., which I want you to take a note of as well. 31. Steve Kerr played 44 games for them. He's age 33 and didn't actually shoot the three ball that well for them that year. I think you can blame Craig Popovich for some, he doesn't love the three ball himself, so I think he might have schemed Steve Kerr out out of that a little bit. But I just don't see the spacing. I don't see the star power. Defense translates a little bit to the regular season, so maybe they catch some teams on a back to back and they're able to win an extra game or two here and there. But I don't know if I see a title contender.
I'm kind of in the same point. I mean, even by 90s standards, San Antonio was reluctant to shoot the ball, to
Yeah.
say it kindly. They finished that year 25th out of the 29 teams in three-point shots attempted
Wow.
and 19th in three-point percentage.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jaren Jackson Sr., the father of our reigning Defensive Player of the Year. He actually led the team in three-pointers made per game and attempted per game
Wow.
with a boisterous 1.1 triple per game on 3.1 attempts.
Oh man, what's that? That's got to be, let's see, 36%. That's like league average today.
And at the heart and the soul of this team, Duncan and Robinson, they finished the year a combined 1 for 7 from beyond the
That's
arc.
hilarious.
The only thing these guys were stretching was their hamstrings in the pregame warm-ups. No,
Oh
this
my
it,
gosh.
stretch five, stretch four did not exist in Popovich's vocabulary. Very much the epitome of 90s basketball, late
Yeah.
90s basketball anyway. Very much the epitome of a Popovich team. They average just 92.8 points per game, but they hold opponents to just 80.7. Now, this is back in the days where scoring 100
Man.
was so rare that when it did happen, the whole arena got a free taco.
Man,
Uh,
imagine you're 9 to 5, you just got yelled at by your boss. You want to sit back, enjoy some dinner, watch some NBA basketball, and you tune in to Spurs Knicks, and it's like it's it's 78 to 73, and I'm just like, what's going on here?
it's
There's a certain art to defense. I know it can be appreciated. I think it's kind of a novelty for the era. I know you and I have talked about this, where I'll watch 90s clips back or 90s games, and there's something oddly nostalgic about it, even though I was a little
oh
too young to enjoy it at the
yeah,
time. There's a novelty to the era, but at least for me, it's just not as nice of a product, you know.
yeah, no, and there's got to be a happy middle ground,
Oh
right? I
yeah,
mean, the
yeah.
day where teams are chucking up half their shots as
It can go too
3 pointers.
far. Absolutely.
It's almost more like a skills competition, just to see whoever happens to be hot, have the hot hand
Yeah,
that
good
wins the
point.
game.
I agree with that.
So we've gone a little bit too much in this way, but we were way too
On
much
the other
this
side.
way in the 90s. Case in point, Duncan actually finishes the league sixth in scoring this year with 21.7 points per game.
Wow.
In this season, 21.7 would have been good enough for 26 in the league in scoring.
Wow.
A tenth of a point ahead of Mr. Bojan Bogdanovic. Uh,
Bogey.
they have an incredibly slow pace. They have a pace of 88.6. This past season, the slowest pace team in the league, Cleveland, had a pace of 95.7. Um, that's just an anemically slow basketball game and very, very few, if any, shooting.
Yeah.
Which leads us to my final decision. You can tell me if you disagree or agree with this one. As great as this team was, and again, they were fantastic. For most of the season, they had a 71 win pace. As great as this team was, their greatness was directly related to being a product of their time and era. And simply, they would not have the offensive juice or the offensive game plan, versatility to compete in today's NBA
Yeah.
game. I'm expecting about a 500 team, 35 wins, 8 seed playing. I just don't see this team has having the juice to play in the modern game.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot that translates into the modern era. At least with the Pistons, who are 10 years older than this team, at least I saw a lot that could translate. The versatility, the star
Yeah.
power. Maybe they're actually a lot deeper than the Spurs team as well, objectively. But the archetype I look, when I first thought of the Twin Tower Spurs, when you originally texted me this idea, I'm like, well, can two bigs work today that both of them can't really shoot? I mean, Duncan to a point eventually in his career had a decent mid-range shot. He had that
We
patented
got it.
off
It
the
was
backboard
it was
shot.
the construction during this
Right.
'99 season. Let's say that it wasn't
Right,
wasn't quite what it was.
exactly, not what it was, and of course, Robinson never had that because he didn't have to have that in his repertoire. I thought of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, two bigs who play together this year on a good team. Neither can shoot, but both are elite defensive bigs. But the difference with the Cavaliers of 2023 is that they have two elite guards in the backcourt to help create
Yep.
shots, to help play make, to help get them the ball, and to help space the floor. And when I look at the Spurs team, I don't see anyone who is playing the Darius Garland or playing the Donovan Mitchell for those two big men. And if they had that, if they had a more competent, not even necessarily an all-star caliber guard, but someone who had traits of those two Cavs guards, I would maybe bump them up a little bit, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure Avery Johnson or Steve Kerr is going to get the job done as far as creating shots for those guys, as far as spacing the floor adequately over an entire season. I know we're agreeing on this one again, but I ultimately landed on this being probably a play-in team. I always say stars, all-time greats are so good that their greatness should transcend the era. And you know what? Duncan probably puts up some decent numbers. 22-year-old Duncan probably puts up good numbers in 2023. But
I think he does. I think he does.
um,
Absolutely.
I don't see this team going up. I mean, this team probably gets shredded by the Nuggets. I mean, I don't know. So I landed where you landed. I don't know if this is probably a team that's right there on the 7 through 10 seed arena. Hoping to host a play-in game maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they were the culmination of the front court dominated game,
Right,
and they
right,
were the peak of the front court dominated game. But to your point, we are now in a back court dominated game, and they had nobody in that back court who could, on a dime, put up 20.
right.
So the NBA Time Machine, we've made a lot of stops in today's episode, Josh, and we thank you for joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. The idea of taking teams from different eras and different times and pitting them against one another, or putting them in a different era in this case, is a topic that, if you enjoyed, we can definitely do in further episodes. Maybe make it a series. Um, Follow us on social media at Dribble on Twitter. We're also going to be on TikTok. We're also going to be on various other social media platforms, so look for us. But if you like what you've seen or listened to today, just do us a quick favor. Just give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscription if you feel so inclined. That will really allow us to continue to bring you this kind of content and continue to grow the show.
Goes a long way, honestly. We're going to be trying out some new things. We're going to be up in the quality. We're going to be up in the frequency as well. We want to deliver a really nice product, and the feedback goes a long way. And not even just feedback. We love talking ball with people. It's a passion of ours, clearly, which is why we want to do this. So even if you want to just give us your thoughts, tell us what you think. We love different perspectives. We're definitely not right. That's the beauty of the game. That's the beauty of analysis, is that different perspectives are brought to the table. So interact with us. We love it. And we're excited to bring some new episodes. Looking for those every 2 weeks, ideally. And keep your eyes peeled for those.
Until next time, this is Once Upon a Dribble.
Signing out.